welcome to the Beyond the X and O's podcast, brought to you by the Coaches Site, the #1 online resource for hockey coaches. This podcast is hosted by myself, Dr. Cassidy Preston. I'm a mental performance coach and founder of CEP Mindset, and Piero, who has spent the past 30 plus years in the game of hockey from the NHL on down, including where he coached me back in the junior days. And might I add, we won a championship together. Now we get to work in the mental performance and leadership space. Today's guest from Philly. The Phillies are doing well, Chris. I'm excited to get recording this intro with you. How are you doing? How are the Phillies doing here?
I'm doing great. I guess in general, it's a good time to be a Philadelphia sports fan. Not only are the Phillies off to the World Series for the first time since 2009, Philadelphia Eagles and the NFL are doing fantastic, and the Philadelphia Flyers have got off to a great start under new head coach John Tortorella. But I want to go back to the Phillies because I think first time I met Lee was on a Zoom call with yourself, Cass, and in the background he had a Phillies jersey, and this was in the summer. I made a smart aleck comment about the Phillies, and he was really gracious. He didn't really, he just said, "Hey, he's a big fan." And so when we got into the podcast taping last week, as you recall, right away I had to apologize to him because at that point the Phillies were in the National League Championship Series against the San Diego Padres, and subsequently, as we record this on Monday night, they won last night, and as I said, advanced to the World Series. So, pretty cool, pretty happy for Philadelphia fans, and for Lee as a huge Phillies fan, good for him, and kind of appropriate as we tackle this episode. I do want to add in on a personal level. I did run a marathon a week ago. I was pretty happy and proud of running a marathon. It was a bucket list item. I'm 54 years old for all the listeners out there. It wasn't an easy task, but I stayed committed to the cause and did my training and was able to complete a marathon. So I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, no, congrats again. It's quite impressive. So
thank you.
And I know you're hurting for a couple of days, but it was worth the pain. Worth the pain, I'm sure.
The pain, absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. And then in the hockey world with the NHL's up and running, and I know there was one quote that was out this week where in Vancouver where the coach Bruce was talking about his players are mentally weak. And so I had a few thoughts on that. Maybe I'll share mine first before throwing it. One thing, I'm always cautious to label, right? And as soon as you label, if the players are reading that, maybe they'll respond well. Maybe it was just, maybe that's an old school comment or whatever the point is, but we could simply frame it as, hey, we got to work on becoming mentally stronger. Like no player got to the NHL and they're just, completely mentally weak. Maybe they're not showing enough mental strength and enough resiliency or enough composure and certainty and trusting their capabilities out there. But, I think it's an important take that, we always because it's really easy. And I see this when I was in minor hockey more, or even in junior, like coaches are quick to blame, label players' mental state or mental game. And that's not really helpful. And then we're perpetuating this like, oh, you either got it or you don't. And it's like, it's not that way. It's something you work on. And yeah, maybe they're having a tough mental game and made some mental mistakes or not being resilient, but how we frame things matters. So I thought I'd just go off on a little rant there. I don't know what you want to add to that, but that was my quick take.
Yeah, you know what? It's interesting because the Canadian media, being in the Canadian market, and I know the Vancouver market is very passionate about their Canucks. They've been in a rebuild for what seems to be an eternity, 10 years, I think, since they made the Stanley Cup Finals. So I'm sure there's a little bit of that, in that marketplace, there's a little bit of heat. So maybe some logs are on the fire and maybe Bruce Boudreau is just, challenging his team. I would ask the question, how was training camp? You had training camp to kind of build some resiliency and some mental toughness through training camp. And I don't know, obviously, not seeing their training camp, but I would ask that, especially because it's so early in the season, and I think that's, as you say, a lot of these players most of these players are there for a reason because of some probably, some mental fortitude through the process that they would have had to undertake to get there. So maybe, it's a way to challenges guys, and it's a long season, so there's a lot of hockey still to play. But the Canadian market in general, in terms of sports, hockey fans are pretty ruthless. And, we see it in Toronto, and, Sheldon Keefe had a little bit of, some hiccups there with the media, and he was getting, raked over the coals, and everybody's just saying, let's pump the brakes here. It's 6 games in, let's understand this and see how things go and progress here. So a lot of hockey to play.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the training camp's a good way to look at it too. I think you had noticed, or you had mentioned, I haven't seen it yet, but the Nashville training camp series, I think it's on YouTube, you think you said, and just about, hey, the quality of their training camp and some good insights. And I think it's setting that tone and going beyond the X and O's. Okay. A little cliche for our podcast there, but and doing that from the get-go, building trust, building that momentum. So anyways, good reflection points, as and hopefully I'm sure they'll work through it. And my understanding, I met Bruce once or twice, and saw him speak. Hopefully they'll turn that ship around especially in that Canadian market, because they're going to get real hot there if they don't. So, any other final comments on the news and the sporting world? Otherwise, you can tee up Lee, our great Philly guest here, with lots of Philly pride.
Yeah, you know what? No, I think we're good to go. And with that being said, Lee Elias is a 2-time award-winning author and is coached at the international, professional, collegiate, and youth levels. He is also the founder of Hockey Wraparound and Game 7 Group. In addition, Lee's professional experience includes having helped organizations such as the NHL, NBC, Hearst Media, A&E, Madison Square Garden, and several other sports organizations. Lee is an acclaimed keynote speaker in both virtual and in-person events, and is the co-host of Our Kids Play Hockey, a top podcast in the hockey market. Lee is passionate about his mission to make the world believe in trust and teamwork through his coaching, speaking, and consulting work. Lee brings it, is all about bringing people together, and, his enthusiasm, it shines right through, as as the listeners will attest to after, really the first 3 to 5 minutes, he just dives right into it. So some practical strategies that he provides, insights, but mostly his passion and excitement for what he does in his work. And Cass, what kind of resonated with you through this?
Yeah, there's so many good practical takeaways, and we got connected through Lee. Previously, I read his book, very unique book on win, about creating championship cultures, and I think it's one of my couple big ones was like the process of communication and the accountability chart. So both just very clear ways of like, hey, how can we get better at these human skills? And there's some similarities. I think our guest back last year, Mark Gouvernement, it's just very practical. Like, how do we work with teams to help them build better cultures, team cohesion, trust, and bringing some practical strategies. So definitely worth a listen for that. As well as my other 2 kind of big ones was like, trust and creating the team within the coaching staff, as well as looking at the coaching staff as a whole, as a team. But I know you had some other good takeaways. Before we let the listeners dive in, I'll let you, wrap up this intro.
Well, I think, he references it really early too, in terms of the idea of his work with military veterans and in terms of integrating them back into society, and does a lot of work with military veterans in that regard. So it's pretty impressive, in terms of helping them kind of reestablish their identity, no different than, athletes in terms of their identities attached to, what they do versus who they are. So I think he kind of talks a lot about that. And I think that's a really pertinent point that he brings, but using the military as the ultimate team, I think is the quote that he used, in terms of being able to say, and using the examples of the military and applying it to sports, as best he can. So, just really, really enjoyed the passion, really enjoyed the enthusiasm, and very practical, as you said, practical advice and insights that he provides. So it's a great interview, and hopefully the listeners get a lot out of this one.
Yeah. Well, we'll leave it at that. Let them jump in. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, reach out with any questions, all that fun stuff. And we'll see you in the next episode.
The Coaches Site is hockey's leading online coaching resource and was created to provide hockey's top coaches, leaders, and performance experts with a platform to share their experience and insights with coaches and organizations of all levels, with the goal of enhancing the development opportunity for their players. A membership includes access to 500 hours of educational videos, a library of over 700 drills, articles breaking down the latest tactics and systems, and the opportunity to join a coaching community of over 15,000 coaches from around the world. Regardless of the level you coach, the Coaches site is going to provide you the ultimate coaching toolkit. Listeners of the Beyond the X's and O's podcast can save 25% off an annual membership by using the code BEOUTSTANDING when you register. Again, get registered today by using the code BEOUTSTANDING at thecoachesite.com.
CEP Mindset provides mental performance coaching to elite athletes, teams, coaches, and business executives so they can achieve consistent elite performance. Our one-on-one coaching programs help elite athletes break through their mental blocks and take their game to the next level.
In addition, we offer team programs that help athletes improve their mental game and leadership skills. An important part of these programs is we work with you, the coach, to go beyond the X's and O's. We help you develop the human skills of leadership and become your listening partner. Just like athletes need coaches, so do coaches.
And at CEP Mindset, we don't just work in sport. We also work with high-performing business executives and professionals, especially those who relate to being an elite athlete and want a similar approach to optimizing their performance in work and life. Find out more at cepmindset.com. All right, Lee, thanks for joining. And I'm happy to have you on our podcast after I was on yours not too long ago. So why don't you just kick us off with telling the listeners a bit more about your background, your story in terms of all of your interests. You've written a book on teamwork culture. I'm happy to get diving in here, but I'll let you tee up your own story here a little bit.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Well, first off, Cassidy, Chris, it's an honor to be on your show. Again, it might be a return favor, but it's a show I've always enjoyed. So thank you first and foremost for having me here. This is great what you guys do. When it comes to what I do, especially now at this point in my life, it's all about, team development, team building, and really the art of bringing people together and to trust each other and believe in a common goal together, which, again, when you say it that way, it sounds kind of easy, but there really is an art to it. You got to get people to believe in each other, which is always a fun undertaking. And, it's interesting how I got to this point and really made this my niche or niche, depending on where you're from, in coaching. Obviously played the game most of my life, was fortunate enough to play in college, had a cup of coffee in the minors, and became a coach really at a young age, in my early 20s. Coached a team that at the time nobody else wanted to coach. They were on probation with the league and the school, drug and alcohol problems. And I don't know what it was, man. I just kind of knew. Maybe it was me being naive at the time, or maybe it was just divine influence, but I just kind of felt I knew how to bring this group back together and how to get these guys to believe in something together. And I took over, and the team went from 5-25 prior to me coaching to 25-5 our first year together, with a game away from a national tournament berth both years. In fact, the second year we lost in overtime to not get there. But needless to say, I was, I made a lot of mistakes as a coach at that time. I was the head coach and GM of the team. I made the typical new coach mistakes, which is I tried to have my hands in everything and control everything and, micromanage everything. And, you learn real quick, you can't do that. You have to do it. You have to have help. The players have to believe in you just as much as you believe in them. You have to listen as much as you talk. So I walked away from that experience knowing, okay, there's something here. And I really love bringing people together. And like most stories, you fast forward a little bit, and in my late 20s, my life kind of fell apart professionally. I lost my jobs. I lost my livelihood at the time. And, I was really able to refocus after falling into somewhat of a depression on what's important in my life. And at that time I realized, not that I didn't know this, but man, my family really is what's important. My wife, girlfriend at the time, she was there for me. That was important. And that, the game of ice hockey that I choose to coach in and play in was a choice. It wasn't something I had to do to be happy. I changed my identity from I'm a hockey person to, I'm going to be a husband and eventually a father and son and so forth and so on. And, I think that harnessed me completely, because when I ended up coaching pro again in Europe, brought the team building philosophy. That was my role as an assistant coach. It wasn't to do everything. Took another team together. We were picked to be second to dead last. Won the whole thing, and then that team has now a legacy of winning. And it was in that moment that I realized, okay, this is what I'm here to do, is to bring people together. And ever since then, I've been on this journey to do that. And I'll tell you guys both, it's brought me to amazing places. We just won a gold medal with the Puerto Rican national team down in Tampa Bay, or Tampa, excuse me. It's only Tampa Bay if you're the Lightning. I've been able to work with youth teams and adult teams, and obviously it transcends to other sports, but my daily life is focused on, again, bringing people together to accomplish a common goal. And it is incredibly rewarding. I'm incredibly blessed, and it is my mission in life. That is really how I feel right now.
I love it. And I like the succinctness of bringing people together. I know the first time we talked and it's like, yeah, tell me about yourself. I love bringing people together. It's like, and,
Right.
and I think that's so important when you're a leader and a coach, and that, we lose sight of that. I think a lot of times that we can lose sight of it. So, oh no, our job's to go win, or our job's to go achieve things or
Right.
develop. And it's like, a big part of, culture and teams is just the bond and the trust and the relationships and coming together around those goals and achievements. So, obviously I love all the stuff, your book and going through that. There's a couple things that we'll dive into in different ways. And Chris, I'll let you jump in here shortly, but I don't know, maybe just tee up, what drove you. And I know a bit of the background here already, but what drove you to write the book itself, and some of the foundational like principles around that, and kind of the why and the purpose of the book itself.
Right. Yeah. A few reasons on that one. So what's funny about the book you're referring to is it's called Win Championship, or what every team needs to know to create a championship culture. I actually wrote that book in a month. Now, what's funny about that is I had written another book, my first book, which had taken me a year to write, which was actually a book about business. And I was about a year into that, and we had just won this championship in England. And I called my publisher and I said, I got something I got to get down on paper. And she is so brilliant. She said, okay, stop what you're doing and write. And I really wrote the first version of that book in 1 month. And it essentially is my team building philosophy on paper. And I was feeling it, and I knew I was feeling it, and I got it out. And the whole book is based off of my approach, which is a trust first approach. Anytime you hear me speak, you'll always hear me talk about trust, which is the foundation of any relationship worth having in your life, whether it's family, sports, doesn't matter. If the trust isn't there, it's going to be hard to achieve anything. And then a lot of the tactics that I've learned over the years, both from sport, from military. My wife proudly served in the Air Force. My father served in the Army. I've been surrounded by military people my whole life. And I've always looked up to them. My thought process is, because I'm obsessed with team building, I love it, is that who's the best team on the planet? Well, my belief is the best team on the planet is the U.S. military. All right. So when I want to learn something, I go to them. I think they know more about leadership and the words we use in sports: sacrifice, accountability, trust. When you put that into a military sense, you're not talking about jumping in front of the puck on a penalty kill. All right. You're talking about ultimate sacrifice. You're talking about selfless service. You're talking about absolutely taking the ego and throwing it out the door to save anybody around you. And when you have those kind of mentors, and you mix it with a little bit of the 1980 Miracle Team, and watching a lot of Stanley Cup films and understanding the team building approach, that was a big part of helping me develop my process. Now, with that said, Cassidy and Chris, and you'll know this better than most, a lot of my process was also born from really bad coaching. In fact, in the acknowledgments of the book, I thank all of the coaches that didn't coach me well, in my opinion, because they helped me get to this point. And I mean it. I mean that as a genuine thank you, right? There's no. It's not a snarky one. Like, I actually mean that, because so many coaches, sometimes on purpose, sometimes not, make mistakes in this game, or they put themselves first. You know all the things that can go wrong on a team, break their own rules. That it made me hell bent to kind of understand how not to do that. So I'd say honestly, 60 to 70% of my process is based off of things I think I've seen done wrong, and then the other, 30-40% is based on magic that you see when you turn on a slow motion film, or again, the 1980 Miracle Team, or the U.S. military, any badge of honor winner. I mean, you understand. So that's how it came about. I put it on paper, and then I've been evolving it and putting it into practice ever since.
If I can jump in, I love it. I love this discussion, Lee, and it's funny because in your intro you must have said, your passion is about bringing people together about 5 times, and so clearly, you can your passion kind of exudes through your the way you convey it verbally. And I think it's fantastic. And so with respect to that, you mentioned trust, and I think it's great. It is the essence of every relationship, as you mentioned. What other characteristics of kind of bringing people together have you seen to be successful, whether it be from the military or even in your experiences in building teams and in the hockey sphere? What other aspects of things that can you share with our listeners there?
Yeah, and look, I'm just going to reiterate again that trust is the first. You can't skip over that. There's no skipping trust, right? That is the first thing you have to establish. The second thing, which we all hear, is communication. And I'm fond of saying 10 out of 10 problems are caused by poor communication. Not 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10. Because a lot of people don't understand how to communicate with each other, or they don't communicate. Something I'm seeing now, I've been seeing it for a while in younger players, is just a lack of ability to communicate. And then there's frustration from coaches and maybe some older, aged people because, well, just talk, just call. Well, this is a generation that grew up texting, and I don't blame them for that, right? I have to adapt to that. So I think a lot of it comes down to building self-esteem in what is communication, right? It's okay to come talk to me. You have to use your words or text me, whatever, just communicate, right? Find a way to communicate, and then helping them understand a pathway of communication, right? When I say 10 out of 10 problems, I mean, we've all seen this where a player or a parent will jump over someone, go to the head coach, talk to the coach, decisions made, and then you get nepotism, and then it just falls apart. So one of the things I do literally the first day is talk about I call it the hierarchy of communication. It's probably not the right word, but here's the process to communicate something to the team. There's players, there's captains, there's coaches, there's GMs in some cases, there's owners. This is how we would like you to have the process of communication. And it goes both ways. Coaches should be able to go to their assistant coaches, captains, up and down that pathway as well. So we really explain, and give scenarios. All right, player X is upset about his ice time. Is it appropriate to complain to his line mates, or is there a productive way he can go to his captain and trying to get this up to the head coach and get tangible takeaways of how you can earn more ice time or understand your role better? Nobody does this in my experience, not just in sports. This is like a human problem. So Communication would be the next one, quickly followed by accountability and a real understanding of what that word means. And it's kind of mixed with discipline a little bit, but the accountable team is a learning team. And I always say that there is a chart, there is a grid of accountability. And the problem I find with most teams, I probably shouldn't say problem. The challenge with most teams is they don't understand. You can't go from just being unaccountable to accountable. You have to walk up the chart. And what I mean by that is this: the bottom of the chart is, it's not my fault, it's your fault, you screwed us. That's the bottom. That's absolutely no accountability, right? But when you move up the chart, this sounds weird, but just saying, you know what? You messed up. Well, still not super accountable, but it's not as bad as the other one I said. And, you can move up the chart of, hey, you messed up. Let's try and fix it, right? Still not the top. The top is obviously, we made a mistake. How do we conquer this together, right? Helping your team kind of move up that chain, I think, is really important. Again, you can see how communication and trust play into that, and then how discipline, in terms of understanding the things you do day in, day out consistently, whether you want to or not. Anybody who watches any motivational TikToks or Instagram stories knows what I'm talking about. You start mixing these elements together, you're in a starting position to do well. A starting position. And this is what I fight for, because I've said this before, guys. I can get any group of people. They could hate each other. I can get any group of people to work together for a day. All right? That's not hard. Getting to do it for a season, 6 to 9 months, when you're facing massive amounts of adversity by the hour, that's a challenge. So establishing these things is the starting point, not the full season to me, right? Now you're prepared to conquer what comes at you during the season. So those are a couple of them.
I appreciate that. I want to drill down there because I like that, because it's almost like you say, it's a starting position, but it's really about the ability to understand that these are skills that need to be honed through the course of a season, as you mentioned. I want to go back to the communication piece, because I always think of communication. It's obviously a two-way street. Obviously, it's the person doing the communicating, but it's also the person receiving the communication. And that person's willingness to receive the communication. A lot of times on the player side, maybe, today's generation gets a bad rap or a good rap. I don't know what kind of rap they get in terms of, everybody says they're lazy, they're this, they're that. I will argue that every generation of kids have had that rap against them, and it's up to the coaches and or the people in charge to find a solution to be able to work with them, develop them. But it's the ability then to have them understand and receive that communication in a manner in which it's going to be not demeaning, but maybe sometimes demanding, but sometimes truthful. But it's really about out of respect to them and their growth and development, both as a person and as a player. And I think that's where I find, there seems to be this, like almost to your point of saying that there's this short-term thinking. Hey, I say something now and it has to be dealt with now or has to be implemented now, versus the receiver has to understand that this is a process.
You have to be patient.
I don't know if you can expand on that or.
Look, I always say a few things. One is I like to use the phrase, you have to give yourself permission to be patient. All right. And look, in ice hockey, it's not a patient sport. Everything moves very quickly. It was actually golf that taught me patience, believe it or not. Right. Like most people. But to expand upon that, look, here's one of the stigmas about communication. When I say the word, for your listening audience, I say the word communication, think about what you think about. Like what comes to mind while speaking and talking and saying things. Well, there's another half to communication, that's listening, right? This is something I work on all the time. I'm clearly a talker, all right? Just you can tell that by the way I'm speaking here. So active listening is something I've really had to work on. And I'm committed to working on, right? Really listening to the other person, taking it in, not waiting for my turn to speak, maybe digesting something a little bit, saying it's okay, permission to be patient, to come back tomorrow with my thoughts on this, and not just having to jump ahead. And again, there's some situations where you can't do that, but most that you can. The other part of it is, and this is where I want to dissect it, and this is something I've been studying a lot in recent years, is just ego and shedding the ego. Right? It's not about I know and you don't. I mean, again, there are certain situations where experience comes into play, but I find a lot of they don't communicate, they're lazy. That's all ego. Every generation's the same. Every generation's different, right? And again, however your or my or their generation's experiencing the world, you can't hold that against them. Like, I remember growing up, my grandmothers were born in the teens. And they were tough women. And I never met my grandfathers, unfortunately. But these were tough women, all right? And I remember I asked my brother one time something about my grandmother, just like, why doesn't she ever hug? And she's because, they starved in the 30s and there was a war for the 40s and the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, and putting food on the table was essential. And there was a good chance that someone might not come home every day. That's why they're like that. And I immediately had respect. Now, and with that said, look, my other grandmother trekked across Europe, running away from the Bolsheviks who were trying to kill her. And she was the kindest woman I've ever known in my life. So everyone's experience is different, and you got to drop any ego you have about how you think the world should look, right? And understand that, we've been throwing the word empathy around a lot as a society lately. Just imagine yourself in someone else's shoes. Let's talk hockey. Think about their parents. Think about their coaches. What have these young people been told their whole life? What kind of messages have they been receiving? This is, by the way, I know people listening know this, but this is the work that you both do so well, right? Is dissecting this and understanding. I have so much respect for what you guys do in your work realm because of this. But yeah, you got to drop the ego and really kind of just see it without judgment. That great quote, be curious, not judgmental, right? That's which Ted Lasso has going all around the world right now. But it's so true. Be fascinated by a young athlete's struggles and how, if you're a true coach, you can help them navigate those waters and give them, again, tangible action items to work on so they can be accountable, communicate better, find trust, be disciplined, going back to all the words that we said.
Yeah, I love it. I want to jump in because it's the first chapter in your book, and all these things, and I think is a good foundational chapter too, is about the bond. And you talk about that and just the importance of, because all these traits that you're talking about, lead to that bond within a team. And also probably I'll tee up it already, but like the U.S. Marine Corps, you've already brought it up, and just how, some of the tools they do. And so just kind of diving a bit into that, and what are some of the strategies you encourage coaches, leaders, and to cultivate that bond and all these different traits that we're touching on. I just want to make sure to dive into that because I think it's such a foundational and good chapter in the book.
Yeah, thanks, man. Actually, the original title of the book, the working title, was The Bond. And then my publisher and again my editor wisely said, people aren't going to know what that is. You should. They said, why don't we call it Win? I said, actually, that's a great title. I like that. But yeah, look, the bond. Anyone who's won knows what this is, right? The bond has got to be impenetrable, and it is the belief in everyone around you that you're fighting for the same thing or things. All right. So one of the things I do when I work with teams, in addition to everything we talked about, is I'll always ask, what do we want to accomplish this season? And what do we want to do this season? And I'll always get the same answer. We want to win. We want to win. And I go, that's great. Every single team wants that. So that's not enough, right? And what does winning even mean? Look, I'm fond of saying this. Winning can be defined however you want it to be. All right, sure. Winning games is the standard definition. If you're a coach, that's your resume. Totally get it. All right, I've been that. I've ridden that wave. But here's the truth. You should have many wins for a season. And what is winning? Who are you? What is your identity? Why are you here? Why are you fighting for this person sitting next to you? That's how the bond starts to form, right? And the bond is when a group of people, and I want everybody to listen to understand, what I'm about to say is incredibly rare. Incredibly rare. And that is why I fight for it every day. All right. But to get a group of people to selflessly pursue the same goal is almost impossible. But that is the bond. And in sports, we get that more than any other medium except for the military. All right. And it's a gift. Right. So what I do, and this is why I'm so passionate about it. Look, they call 1980 a miracle. Right. And it was. But that team was so bonded around this belief that they could do what they did, that it was a miracle. So when I find that I get to work with teams and they do this, I feel like we're accomplishing miracles together. Like that's the verbiage I use. So it's a sacred thing. If you win together with a bond, you literally walk together forever, to quote the great Fred Shiro. All right. I'm from Philadelphia. Forgive me for using that.
I love it. Love it.
It's a great quote.
That's brilliant.
But that's what it is. It's a communal belief in a common goal that we are going to accomplish together in a selfless environment. And it is essential to accomplish anything. I don't care if you're going to the moon with NASA. I don't care if it's winning a junior hockey championship. I don't care if it's your family buying your dream home. You got to be together, and all the elements have to be the same. And that's what the bond is to me. And again, I'll tell you guys this. Look, we've all won here in some form. And I've said this before too, that the only thing more that provides more elation than winning is probably a kid being born, right? I think that's a little higher on the chart, but man, winning a championship is pretty darn close. It's not there, but it's pretty close. I would never equate that over my kids being born, but you need the bond to do that. And Cassie, that's my answer, right? It's a magical thing to me that I don't think as a community, as a country, as a world, we put enough emphasis on. We don't know what we can accomplish as individuals or together. And when you put them together in one room and get that common belief, man, magic can happen. It's unbelievable.
It's amazing because we had Andrew Cogliano in our last episode, and Cogs was like very articulate about that bond that the Colorado Avalanche had, and what struck, I think, I don't want to speak for Cass, but I know in off air we talked about this. What struck both of us is that he just came to that team after the trade deadline.
Right.
And he was able to be integrated along with a couple other guys, but they just were assimilated into that group. Right. But then they felt the same group dynamic of what they were there to do. And he just said he's never been part of a team as close as that group. And that's a big reason why they won the Stanley Cup. So the things that you speak about being magical, he articulated that from his experiences at the Stanley Cup level. And it's very, very true. And it's very true.
I want to say this too. Look at the coaches of the last 3 Cups. It's Bednar and Cooper, right? And you look at the way these guys hold themselves. Look, Cooper did something after the last Cup that almost kind of shocked me. This guy is so present and so understanding of his position that they lost the cup. And I don't know if you guys remember his press conference after. He was just saying, I'm so thankful that I got the 3 cups in a row. And this one hurts, but I'm so fortunate to be here at the NHL and to do this. And then you go to Bednar and he's talking. He's like, wow, it's just so wonderful to be here. My team. I mean, the culture they've created is impenetrable. So it's not surprising to me that, you walk into that locker room, you're in a room of excellence and championship caliber thinking and understanding. And listen, you can talk to guys around the league not on a team like that, and they'll tell you. I mean, it's obvious that doesn't exist, right? So look, a lot of that comes down to the coach, the ownership. There's a lot of things, but the culture surrounding the bond is an understanding of we're going through this together. I'll remind everybody too that the Colorado Avalanche were the worst team in the league by far 5 years ago. They were miserable, and they created this in relatively a short amount of time. And they could have probably won, the season prior too. It was just Tampa's time again, right? Much less what was going on in the world. So yeah, I love hearing that because it really is a cultural thing. And once you have it, you have it.
I think that you talk to anybody on a championship team, you talk to your Philadelphia Phillies right now. I'm sure, that group is just feeling that bond, right?
We're seeing it real time.
I mean, some people, they talk about capturing lightning in a bottle, but it's really about they're capturing that bond, and it's like it's that spark, and it's great to see in any sport. And I think you said it earlier. Sports is provides the greatest medium aside from, they say, maybe the military, but that concept of that coming together, and as a former coach, but as a guy who studies leadership and understands leadership, I just think this is brilliant because you talk about all the things of trust, the communication, the accountability, but that bond, then now you're talking about something beyond. It's hard to quantify, right? What are you going to do for the person beside you, across from you, diagonally from you, and what I find interesting, and you say, can that concept be replicated in the business world? And I'd say 100% it can be.
Oh, yeah.
And, there's a lot of different businesses that have replicated that. And I just think there's an element to that, I think that a lot of businesses are missing, and, other teams are missing in sports, let's say. And so I think the things that you're speaking of are really, really profound. So, I'm not sure there's a question there, but it's just more of a reiteration of what you're talking about, because I think it speaks to a lot of things that Cass and I espouse.
Let me say this I'll try and say it real quick. Obviously, I said I talk a lot, but just to prove your point.
So do I, though, Lee. That's the issue, right?
I hope you all have time for a 6-part series here between the three of us. I'll give you a disturbing stat that proves exactly what you said, right, Chris? I do a lot of work with transitioning military. So these are guys that are just about to transition. And we call the year from separation, the day you separate 1 year, is called the deadly gap. And without going too deep into it, the veteran suicide rate in the first year of transition is catastrophic. More men and women die due to suicide out of the military than they die in combat. And we don't talk about it. Now, why am I bringing this up? The military is the greatest planet in the world. The greatest team in the world. All right. This is the only planet we know of. So they're the greatest team in the world. And when you're in the military, you have a extreme purpose, an extreme identity, and an extreme community. You have all three of those things. And I'm going to equate this to sports. The day you separate, you potentially lose all three of those things. And when those three things are gone, you will go into a depression. Again, identity, who you are, purpose, why you are here, and community, the people that you surround yourself with. Sports is exactly the same. We all get postseason blues, whether you win or lose. And it's because you're missing those three things in some form. You go to the corporate world, out of the military. You go from the military to the civilian world. Well, the purpose in the military is the mission. Purpose in the real world becomes the bottom line and cash flow and money. Your identity is, I am a soldier, I am a warrior. Maybe some other things, but primarily that. You might not be given a role in a job. You might be given a job title without a role. You might go to work the first day and not even understand what you're doing. And then the community doesn't have trust, can't communicate for the most part, and is really, in a lot of ways, egotistical. Can't blame them, the way the world works, because you got to survive. Not only can society learn from sports and the military, we have to. You will face more adversity in a hockey game than you will in a month in most places. I won't even go through a season. So Kobe Bryant famously said, if you practice 4 times a day, you're going to get better than the guy practicing 1 time a day. Well, as athletes or military, we're constantly training ourselves over and over again to deal with adversity. Then you get onto a society that really, I'm not knocking society, but doesn't have these kind of base level things that you need to create a bond, but just a functional team. And people are upset, and people are ripping each other apart right now. Won't even get into politics and what that's doing, right? And this is the key. I said it before: purpose, identity, community. As human beings, as a species, we are meant at a biological level, at evolutionary level, to work together. We are built to do that. We're animals. And what's wrong with us right now? Everything is pulling us apart. And ironically, into smaller teams, but they're pulling us apart. So do I think sports and military can help us? I think I think the answer is right there. And we, again, if you can't tell, I'm pretty passionate about this stuff because that's what the world needs. I just want people to see it and believe it. I love what the Phillies are doing right now, but I see that as a higher calling of look what we can do if we really put our mind to something, right? Any team that's winning, all of my teams happen to be winning right now, but that's not the point. Any team that's winning has that belief. You don't win the World Series because you think you might. You win because you effing know you're going to win the World Series or the Stanley Cup or the NBA Finals or the Super Bowl. You know you're going to do it. No team ever went into the Super Bowl thinking they were going to lose. I just would love to see that thinking come back on a societal level, American level, Canadian level. I would love to see more of that. I just think the answers are there. Sorry, I am on a soapbox now a bit, but you got me going.
Oh.
Chris, you can blame yourself for that. Cassidy, I'll throw it back to you.
I've been practicing my listening skills here. I've often
I haven't.
But it's no, that I thought that was an unreal rant. Rant mightn't be the right word or not, but an unreal tangent.
It was something.
It was something, and it was.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it, and I'm going to circle back to it, but I want to make sure to highlight first. I thought it was a unique look, and you talk about just the joy of those like championship teams and that feeling, and a lot of that feeling. And one way to maybe frame this, and I'll get your feedback on it too, is it's the relationships. It's like the bond that is there along the way, because you can also have that great feeling and not win too, but which is rare, but it happens. Yeah. I've been on teams. Right. There's teams like, I love that season. I enjoyed my team. Right. And because when you look back at the championships you win, is it lifting the trophy is like the big key moment? No, it's like the journey and the relationship is actually what makes winning the Stanley Cup or winning these big championships so meaningful. And they go hand in hand, right? So it's like, what comes first, cohesion or, winning and success? And they go together to a degree. And there's the research even shows I forget the technical research term now, but it's like the bi-directional correlation or whatever it is. But the point being is, I think that's an important way to look at it. And again, so what can we control? We can actually work on in these tangible ways to work on creating that bond, and that it perpetuates and tees that up. And then, and I'll tee this back to you in a second. So now I'm going on my rants.
No,
here.
Please do. I enjoy hearing you speak, Cassidy, believe it or not.
That's good. So I like the purpose, identity, community, and how that's tied to intrinsic motivations in every human for autonomy, relatedness, and competence. And so, and we talk with athletes and at the end of a season, and it's important to have an identity more than just one thing. And the communities outside of your team. And those are good human life skills to have that, it's sometimes aren't adopted. But the key, as you talked about, like in the workplace and whatever team you're building, those are just foundational pieces to the human skills, to psychology and understanding how people work, right? Yes, people want to take care of themselves, but one of the best ways to benefit yourself is actually benefiting the team but if you don't have a role and identity, if you don't feel a part of the community and there isn't relationship and you don't feel that others care about you, then why are you going to care about them? And you don't have a common purpose and a way to understand your connection to that and choice and input, which is autonomy concepts. So anyways, all I'm saying is I thought it was a great tangent. And I don't know if you wanted to elaborate any more on that, but in the first thing I said around that experience of the bond, actually, what's a big part of what makes, sport meaningful, let alone life meaningful, which is, people talk about that all the time, is the relationships in life, not the how much money did I make and how much, outcomes and results that I achieve. No, it's the relationships and the experience. And so, and again, they usually go a bit hand in hand there. So now I'll stop my rant. I'll pass it back.
No, you're good. Look, this is what I'll say, just to comment on that, is that I didn't call the book How to Win Championships. It's how to develop a championship culture, right? Because here's the deal. You want to win it, we'll talk about winning the trophy or championship. Only one team gets to do it. It's incredibly hard. We don't talk about that enough in sports. It's insanely hard to win the big title. There are leagues with 4 or 5 championships a year. It's insanely hard to win one of them. So it's not about the actual winning moment. It's about building a culture that can accomplish that at some point. And again, you look at the greats of all time, the New England Patriots for 20 years. You look at the Yankees at different decades. I'll say the Eagles from the turn of the century that didn't win, right? But you look at these great franchises in sports, the Celtics, the Bulls, right? They had this championship culture for a period of time that was maintained. And that's the key. And look, we've all heard this. Everybody here listening has heard this. It's not about the moment. It's about the guys you play with. That's what you miss when you're done. It's always the people. It's always the community. And it's true. And here's the other thing, Cassidy, Chris, is talk about the championship moment. It's just a moment. It passes, right? It's funny. I've matured enough now that, and you'll understand what I mean when I say that, is that I know how to enjoy a victory now. I know it's not going to last. I know the elation of winning a title. I just was very fortunate to win a gold medal with Puerto Rico. It felt wonderful. I was really happy for the team. But you know that it's not going to last. Ironically enough, I got COVID the day after we won. It didn't, felt interesting. I did tell my wife it was worth it, to be fair. All right, I've had it twice now. But my point is that moment doesn't last. But in my office, I tell people this: I don't have any trophies in my office. Won plenty. I don't have any trophies in my office. I have pictures of the moment of victory, because that's the moment I choose to remember. And every time I look at them, I feel a little bit and I remember what we went through to get there, right? Because when you win, the elation is not really we won. It's, all the crap we went through to get here. That's what you're really thinking, right? Look, let's use the Avalanche again. What was it? Johnson and they were hugging after. It was Johnson and why am I forgetting his name? Nathan McKinnon, hugging, crying, saying that, we were the worst team in the league 5 years ago. And we went through all this. That was a 5-year journey for them. It wasn't just this season, this past season. It was a 5-year journey for them to get to that mountaintop. And now they're going to try and do it again, which is even harder. So yeah, look, the journey, the why, something I do with teams, you want tangible stuff for your audience. I list out what the wins are before the season even starts. The obvious one, let's win the title. Right. Let's get it on the board because we know that's one of them. You can have more than one win, right? Here's another one. Can we be professional every day, every game, day in, day out? Can we play a 60-minute game together selflessly or build towards that the whole season? That's another win. Can we do community service together? If you're school, how many seniors can we graduate? What can our collective GPA be? I mean, I can go on. You can have lots of wins. Why would you not establish that with your team? So that here's a scenario everyone's been in. You're not going to win the title. 3/4 of the way through the season, you're not going to win the title. Well, now what? Are you going to let your culture just deteriorate because that's off the table? Or are you going to pursue the other wins that are conducive to creating a title in the future? It's an all the time thing. Professional athletes, you guys know this. I'm just saying this to the audience. They don't turn it on and off. They're competitive all the frickin' time. They are great at what they do when they take the garbage out. They take the garbage out well. They don't turn it off. The team aspect works the same way. You don't turn it off. It's on all the time, on off season, the on season, every game, every practice, every team event. You don't stop. And I'm going to say this too. I do want to talk about this for a few minutes. It's delicate. These bonds that are built, they are delicate. They can be destroyed very quickly if you're not careful. Usually the biggest culprit's the coach by breaking their own rules or going over heads, right? Or the proverbial cancer walks in the locker room and starts to infect the room. but he or she is scoring a lot of goals. We got to keep, they're producing, but they're destroying your bond. I've seen bonds fall apart in a day. I mean, strong ones in a day. So you got to protect it. You got to nurture it. I use that word every day. You have to nurture that bond. You need to have somebody watching over it, or multiple people. That's another thing that's missed a lot. We've achieved it. We have the bond. Well, we're going to win forever now. Now, you need to have someone in tune with your locker room, right? Sometimes that's the coach. Sometimes it's an assistant. Sometimes it's somebody else. But you need to know. Get that heartbeat and protect that bond.
Can I jump in there, Lee?
Yeah, please.
Can I jump in on that point there? Because I think you just touched upon something there. Like, a lot of times coaches are oblivious to the corrosive nature of maybe outside forces or internal forces, and having somebody from the outside being able to look down on them or look in on them from a non-judgmental third party view. How valuable do you think that concept is? And ultimately, obviously coaches are our main audience here and listening to this podcast. How can coaches be self-reflective in that process? Because a lot of coaches in hockey are a little bit reticent to be self-reflective because they're supposed to have all the answers. That's just the nature of the game. And so my point is that I obviously I'm singing, I would sing from the same hymn book that you're singing from right now, but it's being able to understand and get coaches to be self-reflective, but also to be humble enough to allow for somebody else maybe on the outside to say, hey, maybe, this is going on, that's going on, to help kind of have this third party kind of vision or input onto the culture, and having a different bird's eye view on things.
Yeah, I'll say this real quick to that. Great points. I said in the beginning of the episode, when I started coaching, I micromanaged everything. I didn't really know where my gaps were. And I think a big part of this as a coach is maybe recognizing if this is or isn't a gap in your coaching style, right? If you're not in tune with this, there's nothing wrong with that. It's not, there's not a coach in the world that's great at every single aspect of coaching. This is why we have associate and assistant coaches and mentors and psychologists and everything in between, right? So you got to know what your gaps are and fill those in, right? And again, as a coach, look, I know tactics, but I'm not a tactics guy. And I kind of realized that pretty quickly. So I love working with great tacticians because I lack in that department, right? I've always said this too, guys, talk about communication. You could be the best tactician on the planet Earth with hockey, but if you can't communicate those tactics, they don't matter, right? So apply that with any aspect of coaching. You got to know your gaps. You got to fill in your gaps with people you trust. Keep coming back to that. Right. And then you can build a cohesive coaching unit. Right. I think that there really is no definition of what a head coach is outside that person's leading the team and you need to surround yourself with people to fill it in. I mean, I don't think the head coach has to be the best tactician. I think the head coach has to be the best inspirer and the best bringer of people together. Right. And understand how to do that in a conducive environment. So again, Chris, I think it's just about knowing where you fit in that. And if you need someone like that, bring them in. Right. And that person might not have to be there year round. Sometimes it's great to get a fresh perspective. I've worked with teams full-time and part-time. Sometimes the part-time ones are a little bit easier because you come in and, you're seeing stuff that no one's seeing because they've been seeing it every day. It becomes part of their routine. Right. Adversely, sometimes you're there every day, you see more, but it's all part of that process.
And so, Lee, I was just talking about, I was reading an article on the weekend about Daryl Sutter when he got hired by the Calgary Flames a year and a half ago. And when he got hired, he was acting as a consultant to the Anaheim Ducks coaching staff. So I was saying credit to, in terms of Dallas Eakins bringing in a 2-time Stanley Cup winning head coach in Daryl Sutter into his, kind of inner circle, on a, monthly basis or whatever it was, bi-weekly basis. But he felt it was important to have a different set of eyes on what was going on, both in the dressing room and the culture, but also on the ice, practice games and whatnot. So if it can happen at the National Hockey League level and coaches having that kind of humility to be able to bring in others, I'm fairly certain it can happen at every other level. And I just think there's an element to, I think from a leadership coaching ability to understand that humility piece. And I think I think that gets underscored a lot of times in coaching. So I don't know if you want to talk about the importance of humility to coaching and leadership.
Well, yeah, I think it touches back on ego a bit and kind of letting it go. Right. And look, again, I keep coming back to it. You have to be able to trust your assistant coaches. Okay. Nobody wants to coach under the guise of someone trying to come after your job. All right. So that happens, unfortunately, more than not, maybe not at the NHL level, but other levels. But yeah, you have to know your gaps. You have to understand how to communicate. Look, the coaching team is a team within the team. Yeah. All right. And you have to be a better team than the team itself, because you're setting the standard for the entire team. Right. So when I talk about impenetrable bonds and trust and communication, the coaching staff has to emulate that better than the actual team does. Because as you go, the team will go. And I think that, especially at the NHL level, you look at great coaching units, man, they really get along. They really understand each other. I think about teams I've been on where I've been an assistant and I take a selfless, approach to this. Like, I'm here to serve the head coach. This is another part of coaching that sometimes assistant or associates kind of lose sight of. Your job's not to coach a team. Your job is technically to serve the head coach, how that person wants you to serve. Right. And when you keep it on that level and understanding that there's communication, you can have opinions, but that person's in charge, it's, again, militaristic in nature. That's your commanding officer, right? You take orders. Maybe one day you'll be the commanding officer, but you might not be in that moment. And I think it's important for the success of the team as a whole that the coaching team is just as bonded as the actual full team.
Love it.
I love this, and I want to be mindful of your time. One thing that we, I love about some of our previous chats we've had, Lee, is, and some of your strategies and apply strategies about trust and defining trust. And I won't give away the whole book, but I think it's such a
chapter
unique,
1, man. We haven't even got into
just
the book.
chapter 1.
Right.
So
for everybody's listening. Yeah. No, go ahead.
Yeah. So it's, but I think it's it made me, I was like, the simplicity, but importance of it. And it's how we all, I'll let you elaborate, but
sure,
everybody's got their different versions of what trust means and stuff. And so I just think it's such an important point that I want to make sure listeners got to hear straight from you, not from me. So
yeah, no, look, it's the first exercise I do with the team is, can you define the word trust without using the word trust in the definition? So for the listening audience, just think about that for a minute. And you'll probably be coming up with some definition that, has to do with relying on somebody else. And it's true. And I'll tell you a story. I was really fortunate one time to work with an inner city football team, Frankfurt and Philadelphia. And for these kids, murder is a very, very real thing that happens every single year. They lose a player a year to murder. So you ask these kids what trust means, you're getting a different definition than what it means in the suburbs, in another place, in another sport. I always attest, these kids taught me way more than I taught them, right? Trust for them was their life, right? Their life. It wasn't just, hey, you'll jump in front of a puck. Like I said, it sounds like the military again. Yes, a guy in the military what trust means, or a woman in the military what trust means. You're going to take a bullet for me, or that you're just going to do your job. So what you find is this, based on different experiences, based on different upbringings, some people show love through pain. I can't dive too deep into that right now, but people experience these things different ways. Everyone has a slightly different definition of the word trust. And then you're coming into the locker room, most coaches, you got to trust each other. Well, they don't know what that means as the group. They know what it means as individuals. And you can miss people. So someone might see something as trust that somebody else sees as complete distrust. Quick example. A guy will not rat a friend out of something serious, and the other person says, how can you not tell us about that? You just broke our trust. Well, his definition is to protect this person at all costs. This other person's is you tell the truth all the time. And now you've missed each other. And the bond is broken. So the first thing as a team, when it comes to trust, you need to do is define what that word means for the team. And so that everyone is on the same page. On this team, this is what the word trust means. Now you have a communal definition and understanding of how you're going to even take the first step into the season. The first step. You can't win without it. I don't know how teams operate without this. It boggles my mind. By the way, the second question I ask, usually coaches, is do you know what motivates every player on the team? Well, no. Well, how the hell are you motivating them? I just assume they're motivated by I was motivated. Well, that's mistake number 2, right? You got to know what motivates the player. Again, Cassidy, you guys do work on this all the time. You got to know who you are, who you're dealing with. But again, as a team, if you're gonna put yourself on the line for the person sitting next to you, if you're truly gonna play a game for the person sitting next to you, you better all know what trust means as a team and how to apply that as a team. Then take those steps forward, and it will be tested, man. It will be tested the whole season, and you have to nurture it. I'm gonna use that word. You have to nurture it. Trust will accidentally be broken. But last thing, and then I'll shut up, is that I was working with a team one time, and I remember that there was a situation where 2 opposing people on the team had a very different view on something that had happened. Okay. And it was becoming a problem. And the first thing I asked them both, and this diffused it 90%, was, do you both believe that each other is doing what's best for the team? Even though you don't agree, do you both believe that the opposing person here is doing what they think is best for the team? And they both said yes. I said, then we are in a good spot because you both know that you just think what's doing. You're totally gonna disagree here, and we could talk about it. But the fact that there's no malice here, that no one's trying to stab you in the back, like I told them, think about that for a minute. You're on somewhat even ground here. We were able to navigate that problem, and they didn't agree, but we were able to navigate it. All right. If you think someone's stabbing you in the back, or front stabbing you, which happens too, that's it. It's done. The bond is done. You almost can never come back from that. Again, we always say you lose trust or we break trust. the verbiage we use when we talk about trust. It's not, trust disappeared. We break it. It's a physical. We break that trust. And then there's levels to trust. I always say this. You trust the post person will bring your mail, but you're not going to let them watch your kids for 3 days straight. Levels to it, different definitions, different understandings. So again, understanding that as a group is vital to surviving any season, much less winning.
Love it. I love it.
I think it's awesome. We could probably
Thanks,
definitely
hour 2. Let's go. I'm ready. Get set up. Chapter 3.
You're fired up, Lee. You're fired up. I love
it. So I'll let couple final things just to wrap up. One first being, and I know we've had some chats or we work together on some different things, but before and you can talk about kind of how people can reach out. But first, is there anything we didn't touch on today that you wanted to make sure we brought up? Anything about leadership, coaching, culture, going beyond the excellence that any of our listeners you might want to pass on to the coaches listening, people in leadership positions?
Yeah, and Cass, I think this speaks to the work that we both do, is that, excuse me, there's a 2-pronged approach here. And what I love about the realm we work in is that, I approach things from a team aspect. I feel a heartbeat of a team as a group, but within that group, there's individuals. And you have to understand how to mentor an individual and really dive into their psyche and understand who they are, what motivates them, maybe even their upbringing, their background, the little, idiosyncrasies that make them who they are. That is just as important from an individual level as it is from a team level, right? And that making sure everybody understands that. And that's not easy, right? Because everyone is so different. So whereas, I like to build the team front, I think what you do on the individual front is equally as important. And what I would say to coaches is, what are you doing? It's not a challenge, but a thought. What are you doing to cultivate both sides of that, right? Again, X's and O's are very important in hockey, right? If I have to hear one more coach tell me about center, left wing, right wing, when we don't use that anymore, it boggles my mind, right? F1, F2, F3, all right? That's not the game as a whole. If you really want to lead men and women somewhere worth going, these elements are part of it. And I always say this, you need 3 things present to win. Talent has to be there. You have to have comparable talent. Can't win without it. Tactics. Great talents cannot overcome bad tactics. And you need a team bond. You can't win without all 3 of those things. And I find that coaches go, well, yeah, how much time should I spend on the team bond? I go 33.3%. I don't have time for that. Then you're not going to win. The teams that win do this, right? And it's on a group and an individual level. And if you are not comfortable doing it, which is fine, cannot stress that enough, find people who can. They're out there. You're Dr. Cassidy, Chris, they're here, right? So that is my parting word here, because I love the work that we do. Like I don't mean just together. I'm just with the work that we do. Impacts lives, not just teams. And I think that if you create better people, you're going to create better players. All right, and I think we need to lead with that approach more often.
I love it, Chris. Do you have any final thoughts? And otherwise, we'll wrap up here.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, it's speaking to the things that I speak about, and I love hearing about from just a pure, kind of a global perspective versus kind of like just a small picture perspective. It's about creating better people, and through sport, and obviously hockey being the main impact here through in terms of what we do. Certainly there's a great vehicle to do some great things, whether it be team building and understanding how to work within a team, but just the individual aspect of growth and development. I just think what you speak about here, Lee, and what you share with our audience tonight was fantastic. So thank you. That was, certainly a lot of the same, synergies that, Cass and I speak about, both, on air and off air. And it's just, it's something that I think it's a passion, obviously, for you. And we can see it, we can hear it in your voice. And I think it's great. And the game and the sport needs that passion and that kind of excitement that you bring. And, I'm a big believer. And I think what the impetus of this podcast was born out of a quote that Mike Krzyzewski had from, being at Duke University. He just said he never viewed himself as a basketball coach. He viewed himself as a leader who coaches basketball. And so when Cass and I talked about creating this podcast a couple of years ago, it was with that in mind. And I think your work that you're doing is along those lines. So thank you.
No, thank you, Chris. It's an honor. I mean that.
Yeah. Well, just anything, self-plug, book, websites, how to contact you, social media. I know you got lots you could do here, but
we talked about the book enough tonight.
Show notes, but is there anything you want to make sure?
What was the book name again?
No,
what was the name of the book again?
It's Win What Every Team Needs to Know to Create a Championship Culture.
There we go.
On Amazon. But honestly, guys, it's not a self-plug. I'm always open to conversations with coaches, even if you just have a question. This has nothing to do with getting work. If you have a question, I just love talking the game, but I love talking team building too. And most of my handles online are just Lee MJ Elias. And you can email me at lee@game7group.com. And I'm just always open to talk. Again, I'm a big believer of talking about communication. Like, we grow together here, right? So if you agree, or more importantly, disagree with anything I said, I really do want to have a conversation with you, like conducive to learning, because I think that's what it's all about. But obviously, being able to come on here is the ultimate plug. So I appreciate that and the work that you both do.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of this season, and with the Phillies, all your Philly teams are. Hope they keep
don't
doing
date
well.
it too bad. Well, people will be listening to this. Oh yeah, remember they lost to the NLCS? Yeah, it's just no. Listen. I live in the moment. It's a nice moment to be a Philadelphia fan. Soon enough, it won't be. So just enjoy it while you can, like I always say.
Take it while you can. Exactly.
All right. Okay. Thanks again.
Thanks, Lee.